Now to today's panel, and joining me in Sydney is Labor's Michelle Rowland, and here in Canberra, Angus Taylor from the Liberal Party. Welcome to you both.
Hi, Linda.
Afternoon, Lyndall.
We'll first go to the escalating row over spying. Indonesia has questioned the relationship with Australia and is reviewing cooperation on people smuggling and counter-terrorism. The archipelago's Foreign Minister, Marty Natalegawa, says the country is now assuming Australia is spying on it.
The recent revelations will have potentially damaging impact in terms of the trust and confidence between countries concerned. At least they should be able, and this is, I'm making a public expectation here, I think they should be able to say, henceforth, they are not going to do it anymore. Enough is enough. We will have to assume that such activities are taking place and draw our own conclusion in terms of what does it mean in terms of their view of Indonesia as a partner.
Michelle, is the trick with spying, particularly on a friendly nation, that everyone assumes it happens, but it's best not to say it out loud?
Look, Lyndall, I think it's been a long-standing convention that oppositions don't comment on national security matters, and I know that these are matters that go to issues not only of intelligence on people smuggling but also terrorism, and I'm not privy to any of the discussions that have taken place at a high level there. I only know what I've seen in the media, as I'm sure most members of Parliament do. But I can make some comments in this regard, Lyndall. I think it comes at an unfortunate time. It comes shortly after we had Tony Abbott doing his sorry tour of Southeast Asia, saying things before the election and then saying sorry for them afterwards, so it's coming at an unfortunate time. The other point that I'll make is that I think we need to take a really long-term view of our relationship with Indonesia, and even on this program, I think, when Labor was in government, I was getting lectured by members of the opposition who are now in government saying that our relationship with Indonesia should be better, and it's always worse under Labor than under the coalition. Well, look, now that the coalition is in government, they certainly have a number of challenges, and this is one of them. But indeed, going towards taking a longer-term view, I think it's very concerning when we saw before the election taking an axe to aid by this government, foreign aid, and we know that Indonesia is a big recipient of our aid budget, because we know that an educated child in Indonesia is much less likely to become susceptible to getting under radical control, much less susceptible to becoming a terrorist when they're older. So I think a long-term view is really important.
Angus, is the problem that once allegations come out about spying, then the country involved has to respond to it diplomatically, and Indonesia has done that and has suggested it may review some of its intelligence sharing and cooperation on things that are important to your government?
Yeah, look, there's probably some truth in that, and there's no question that the level of intelligence gathering going on in the world has increased as the cost of doing it has dropped with mobile telephones and all that sort of thing. But, you know, I'm not going to get into the specifics of this case, but what's very clear, Lyndall, is that we have a good relationship with Indonesia. It was damaged through what happened over the last 6 years with border protection and the live exports trade. We've been working very hard on it since we got into government, and I'm very confident that the good work that Julie Bishop and the Prime Minister is doing to work on it will succeed. We both have a huge interest in getting this right.
Because it has been damaged previous to that, hasn't it? What happened over East Timor took a long time to get over, so it is possible, isn't it, for these things to pass and relationships to hold?
Of course it is, and you know, it was a first order of business for us to get up to Indonesia and rebuild this relationship. And let's face it, we're making good progress. The border protection work we've been doing is succeeding. There's no doubt about that. We've got a long way to go, and we have a strong intention to get this live export trade going again, which is so critical for our relationship with the Indonesians.
Michelle, as you said at the outset, politicians, oppositions and governments don't usually comment on intelligence matters, but does that stop discussions that should be had about the extent of intelligence gathering being had?
No, I don't think it should stop discussions, and I think in the parliament that we have and the many forums that we have in our community, we have every opportunity to do that, including here today. You know, I think it raises broader questions. I mean, all over the world you see some examples of spying going on, or unauthorised interception and access going on at various levels. We've got the News of the World issue happening in the UK, Angela Merkel and other high-profile people who are, you know, obviously quite upset about being spied on, and you know, you can't blame them for it. And you know, as someone with a communications background, a couple of years ago I did quite a detailed study on the incidence of interception and access in Australia compared to other countries, and at that time the research showed you are actually more likely to be subject to an interception and or access warrant in Australia than many other countries. So I maintain that privacy is the new frontier in our world, and I think it extends beyond this current discussion we're having now, and really permeates into many other aspects that we take for granted in our society.
And Angus, as you said, the cost of doing this is getting cheaper, and it's not just governments, is it? It's corporations, the potential for individuals to spy on other people.
Absolutely, there's no question more of this is going on in business than was the case in the past. So we have to think this through. We have to work it through in our relationship with many countries, and as I say, I'm very confident this government doing things the way we do, which is methodically and responsibly, we will get through it, and we will maintain that strong relationship with Indonesia that's so critical.
We might move on now. It's not a decision he has to make yet, but by mid-December the Treasurer Joe Hockey will have to decide whether or not to approve a bid from the American agribusiness company Archer Daniels Midland for GrainCorp. Mr Hockey's coalition partners, the Nationals, are dead against the sale. ADM is meeting with government MPs to discuss the sale, and some Liberals believe issues such as access to ports and other facilities can be worked out. Angus, what's your view of whether ADM should be allowed to buy GrainCorp?
Well, I should start by saying some are trying to characterise this as a brawl between the Liberals and the Nationals, and nothing could be further than the truth. There's clearly competing issues here. On the one hand, we need much more investment in Australian agriculture. We're not going to get all of that domestically. Some of that will need to come from offshore, and we understand that. On the other hand, these are very strategic assets. The ports, something like 90% of the East Coast export for grain, up-country storage and handling and transport, we're well over 50%, so handing over the keys without a lot of thought doesn't make sense. So that discussions going on. As I say, we're doing it the way that the coalition makes big decisions, and I'm confident that by December we will get to a sensible outcome on it.
I'll go to you, Michelle, in a minute, but Angus, the Nationals have been very clear and public that they do not want this sale to proceed, haven't they?
Yeah, but that's not the same as saying this is a brawl between the Liberals and the Nationals. I mean, there's an issue here to work through. Look, there's many of my constituents that are concerned about where these strategic assets might end up. They're critical as a grain grower, and for someone who's had a lot of experience in the grain industry, I know how important they are. So we have to work this through in a really considered way, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Michelle, can you have a view that that foreign investment is good and necessary for Australia, but still have a close look at each decision that is made in the context of that particular sale?
Well, that's the whole FIRB process, Lyndall. I mean, that's what's supposed to be done. I mean, deals can also be approved with conditions. I note that there has been some criticism in the past that conditions are difficult to enforce years down the track. But issues that Angus raises, such as access to ports, I mean, if there are access agreements in place, you've got it down in writing, you've got mechanisms for enforcement, and I would think that there are certainly things that can be enforced in the long term. But look, I think it's pretty clear. Let's call it for what it is. Look, I've been reading the media as much as anyone else. It's quite clear the Nationals don't want this to happen, and it's quite clear that their coalition partners do. And I think it's quite going to be quite a test for them, because after the election, the big tagline was Australia's open for business. Oh, we're open for business, except if you want some foreign capital coming into Australia. Look, I think that is a significant issue they're going to work through. And bear in mind, Linda, I was in the last Parliament where we had the Liberals and Nationals voted against opening up wheat markets. For Liberals who are supposed to be adapters and proponents of a free market economy, I just find this absolutely bizarre.
But Labor itself has raised questions about foreign investment. The Labor government set up or was going to set up a register of foreign ownership of agricultural land, and Kevin Rudd, when he was Prime Minister in the middle of the election campaign, said he was anxious about the level of foreign investment in agricultural land. So there have been concerns raised on your side of politics, haven't there, Michelle?
Oh, no doubt. But look, we're not in government, Lyndall. We're not in government. This is a decision Mr Hockey is going to have to make. He's obviously getting a lot of pressure from his Nationals counterparts. And look, I believe in free markets. I voted for to make sure that people who grew wheat could then decide who they sold it to in the end. And I just found it was quite amusing, the number of free market Liberals who were quite embarrassed by having to vote on the other side of that debate. But look, these things happen in Parliament. I wonder whether we're going to see the same thing on carbon pricing in the next couple of weeks.
Angus, the Coalition took a position to the election to lower the threshold at which foreign investments, particularly in agricultural land, were considered by the Foreign Investment Review Board. Is there a potential problem, though, because you're negotiating free trade agreements with countries like China, which might actually want a higher threshold? Oh,
no, I don't think there's any conflict between the threshold we're proposing and free trade agreements. I mean, you go to New Zealand and many other countries, they have far better trade agreements with countries like China than we do, with far more restrictions on foreign ownership. So I don't think that's the main issue. What I would say, though, is it's a bit rich for the Labor Party to say that that they had all of this right. Look, the fact of the matter is they didn't listen to farmers, and the point I'm making is that we are spending time now, Joe Hockey is spending time, or the Foreign Investment Review Board and his team are spending time listening to farmers, including my constituents. That's what we've got to do. We got into the live exports debacle because the Labor Party didn't listen to farmers, and it's critical that we actually go through this process now through to December.
Michelle, we might move on. The Reserve Bank Board decided to keep interest rates on hold today at 2.5%. The Reserve Bank Governor said in his statement that the Australian dollar is still uncomfortably high and a lower level of the exchange rate is likely to be needed to achieve balanced growth in the economy. Does that suggest that that rates may be on hold for quite some time until the dollar comes down?
Look, that's one interpretation, Lyndall, and of course we know that a high dollar makes it very difficult for our exporters, not only exports of goods but also services. And again, as someone who did a lot of tendering in the international space, it is very difficult when the Australian dollar goes up to actually stay competitive with competitors who are bidding for exactly the same kind of work. So that is very difficult. I think the other interesting thing to note is, and I was reminded of this just recently, I have an electorate. In my electorate, I've got a suburb called the Ponds, and the Ponds is classified as probably the most advantageous part of Australia, I think. And but you go around and speak to these people. I've had these discussions with them, residents in this area, and I say, you're the most advantageous people. You've got low interest rates. Low interest rates are one part of the equation for people, but still, it is very difficult when you don't have proper infrastructure. It's extremely difficult when you're getting left behind on high-tech infrastructure as well. Some parts of the Ponds have the NBN and some do not. So, I would point out that while low interest rates are an important component of contributing to people's well-being, it certainly isn't the only component, and I think when you speak to people out in the community, you get that message loud and clear.
Angus, do you think that in the end the dollar going down is the thing which will most help people in your electorate, particularly in terms of exporting?
Oh, look, it is important. There's no question about it. I mean, we have been made uncompetitive by the high cost structures and the high exchange rate that's resulted from low productivity and lots of debt. And that's a legacy of the Labor years from 2007 through to recently. But the good news about this Reserve Bank decision, Lyndall, is it's a vote of confidence in the economy and a vote of confidence in the new government. We've seen improvements in retail sales. We're seeing resurgence in non-mining investment, and that's exactly what we were hoping to see as a result of the election back in September.
On that note, Angus Taylor and Michelle Rowland, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Lyndall.
Thank you.
And that's Capitol Hill for today. We will be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, good night.